Hello, everyone. We are here with my weird pug dog sitting under my feet doing I'm not sure what. Yeah, we're doing. We're ready to finish up this speed run that we've been doing this last 3 weeks.
Yep.
So we got a handful of reviews here to get through.
All right. First one is Guest. Okay, this sounds like the Green Goblin from the first Spider-Man movie.
Like with the
Hallucinations
being
of
in the
his
mirror.
evil
Okay,
self.
yeah.
Very Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
I see it. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Guess that's. I mean, I'm thinking about it, and I guess that's one of the only hallucination superhero movies that I can think of at the moment. I'm sure there's others.
Like Tony Stark had a bunch of panic attacks in Iron Man 3, but I don't like. Yeah, maybe
He never
maybe
came.
there
I
was
don't
some
think he ever
shenanigans.
came face to face with himself.
No, no. I guess the new Doctor Strange movie that happened, but I'm not gonna watch that movie because there was just some straight up devil-looking stuff in there. It was
Yeah, it didn't look too. Not my cup of tea.
Sam Raimi leaned a little too hard into Sam Raimi and not Sam Raimi from the Spider-Man trilogy, like Sam Raimi, because originally he was a horror movie director.
I see.
It's interesting because if you go back and watch the Sam Raimi movies, you could definitely see some of that in certain scenes that happen, especially in the second Spider-Man movie, when Doc Ock is in the hospital and he's unconscious, but the arms wake up and start attacking people.
Oh yeah,
It's like a movie straight out of a horror scene.
Absolutely.
My parents would not let me watch that scene.
Oh wow, really?
Until, I don't think I actually saw that scene until I had moved out of my parents' house.
No way.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, because they just they always skipped over it whenever we watched the movie, and looking back on it, I'm yeah, as a child that was definitely not an okay scene for me to watch, and as an adult I was like, oh, that's disturbing.
Yep.
But I'm okay.
But this is more psychological horror, like your Green Goblin here.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, guest. Atomical blinks. No, I did not read that incorrectly. Shrugs, just Mataris being Mataris, and walks away.
Just Mataris being Mataris. What does that mean?
In all seriousness, though, I like this. Don't tell Silver. And if Silver sees this, I'm stealing your coffee.
Yeah, he deserves it.
All right. Thank you, Atomical.
Kenny Silver, we love you here.
All the inside jokes up in here. All right. Joe Clone. I'm going to let Joe take this because my throat is raw.
All right. Joe Clone says, all right, I made a mistake last time, and I tried this, so I'll review last chapter and this one. So I guess you can't leave... I guess you can't leave more than one review on a chapter.
Oh, interesting.
So he wrote 2 words on the last one, and then I guess he couldn't put another one up.
Shoot. Okay. All right.
That's
Got
okay.
it.
We can cover that now. Let's see. So for chapter 86, that was a very intense chapter. Kurai telling everyone he quits was very sad, especially when Deku went overboard. It was unexpected, but definitely in line with the story. Honestly, I should have seen it coming when Monoma copied Energon. Yeah, if you remember, Monoma was kind of unhinged, a little more so in this story. He just went overboard during the Class A versus Class B battle, and that wasn't just entirely due to him being a nutcase. Energon affects your brain, especially if you It didn't affect Kurai's brain so much after Akuru helped him to edit his body, more or less. Yeah. But in its raw form, Energon definitely messes with your head. Mm-hmm. And now Deku is experiencing that. So, yeah, it's how do I put this? It was a dynamic that I knew I was gonna have to reintroduce into the story. And applying it to Deku has been a little more challenging than not more challenging than I thought it was going to be, but how do I put this? It's not everybody deals with their anger the same way. So the fact that these same emotions are inflicted on Deku as a result of this new quirk doesn't mean he's going to have the same reaction or the same responses to these emotions, even at the same speed that Kurai would. So I have to keep that in account every time I'm writing one of these emotional episodes or whatever for either of them. They're different people, so I have to be careful not to default Deku into Kurai behavior, even though some of the again, we talked about transference last time. So some of Kurai's quirk transference is in there, but keeping the balance between the two factors is proving to be very tricky for me. So I hope I'm doing a good job with that. Let's see. He goes on to say, I'm so happy Akadori gets to stay around more. He and Hatsume is something I already said I was very hyped for.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
coming, buddy. It's coming. I promise it's coming. Let's see. Now, Blake. Sheesh, I don't know how close to Ruby canon that, or not that was, but I don't remember her ever getting anywhere close to self-harm. So she didn't self-harm herself like that. I want to say in the second season, she definitely pushed herself to a point where she was harming herself, though that was in an unintentional manner. It was just her overworking herself to the point of burnout, and it was starting to affect her health negatively to the point where her friends had to step in. So this is a much more extreme version of that because these characters have been through much more extreme circumstances. So I saw that she had these tendencies from the season 2 circumstances in Ruby. And from that, if I magnified the consequences and the degree of the harm that was being done to everybody, I figured that her behavior would be taken to an equally extreme degree. So I hope that answers that. I hope that answers that inquiry. But for this story and what we know of her here, it sadly makes all the sense in the world. Kurai giving her that tough love and blackmail bit felt very teenager of the whole situation. Of course, I don't think that was the right call, but I'm a year and a half away from turning 30, so yeah. At least what he did was something that made her come down. The last conversation with Mina getting the crush out on the table was okay, just average teen drama I would expect from lame novels you'd find at a secondhand store. Ow! Not that I didn't appreciate it, I definitely prefer it coming out here and now rather than keeping it in stew for no good reason. Yeah, man, I've watched too many CW shows where they just drag this stuff out and it doesn't do it for me.
Yeah, you hate love triangles. You forced yourself to do this just so you could do the exercise.
I don't know if I'm going to say forced myself. Like, I wanted to experiment with it. Like, I wanted to see how my writing style would handle something like this. And this is the result. But yeah, it's not a trope that I'm a fan of. Let's see. So for chapter 87... says using Mocha as the audience surrogate was good. This far in, I think new readers need a refresher, so good going. I'm glad she's okay. Christmas time is here. Happiness and cheer, or as much as can be had with two Aries. Seriously, I love their interaction. So big Aerie will go by Emery and keep her hair black while little Aerie grows up. Sweet. Yeah, I don't know if I mentioned this last time. So Emery, I just picked that name because it sounds similar to Aerie. So, if one of them slips up and calls her Aerie by mistake, slip of the tongue. Yeah. Nobody's going to think twice about it. Or people could pass it off as a nickname for those who don't know her. Her last name, Hikota, is actually an amalgamation of two names. Hikari and Kota.
Oh.
Hikota. So I haven't figured out I should probably figure out which kanji would be used to make that character. But yeah, it's an homage to both Kurai and Kota, who gave his life to help her out at the very end.
Cool.
So yeah. I do have a question about how the cosmos got affected by Aerie rewinding Earth. Was it only Earth? Did after one day some astronomers notice that space suddenly looked 10 years older? If it was bigger, then by how much? There should be people asking these questions, right? So Aerie rewound time. She affected the temporal scale. It wasn't just the Earth. Like at first it could have been perceived as her rewinding the Earth, but there's a visual that I have in mind that explains this, but I can't do it really without a camera or without the proper equipment, really. The closest thing I can think of is so you got a whirlpool going, right? And so imagine the whirlpool's going now. They have these in museums and stuff, and I loved playing with this as a kid, where it was you would they had this sludge stuff underneath a flat disc that was plastic, and you could see through it. You had these knobs on the plastic disc. You could spin them real fast, and the force of that spin would start the sludge inside to spin really fast, and you would eventually create a whirlpool kind of thing. But then what would happen if you stop? So if you stopped it, the whirlpool would keep going, and eventually it would just stop. The liquid would settle down. But if you stopped it and then very quickly reversed it, the outside would start to spin the other way. But the inside continues to spin. So eventually you have these two opposing forces that meet, and one has to overpower the other, right? What Aerie did is actually something close to that, but before that midway point is reached. So she spun the outside outside liquid in the reverse, right? That was her using rewind on a temporal scale. And so she sends things back 10 years. So if she had kept rewinding, that would have set back like a full universal rewind, which, she doesn't want. So she stopped. So the inner liquid, which has the higher spin rate, if you just so the outside liquid moves slower.
Yeah.
Is something I forgot to mention. So if you started spinning backwards and then stopped it, the inside liquid would eventually overpower the stuff that's on the outside, and it would continue to go spinning in the original direction again. So basically, Aerie started that rewind cycle and then stopped. So the liquid on the inside now reaches that reverse cycle and makes it move forward again. You're not getting any of this,
I am so lost right now.
Yeah. I would need, honestly, I would need, a video explain. I would need, a video.
I guess you're going to have to make a video to explain it.
I may have to explain, this makes sense in my head, and I probably just botched the explanation really badly for anybody who's, trying to listen to this. But, it makes sense. The way that I have it in my head, in terms of, in terms of how we view time from a matter of physics, it makes sense. It's just really hard to explain how without visuals.
Yeah, and I'm dyslexic, so I'm just thinking she rewound a VHS tape, and I'm calling it good. Is,
she rewound things on a temporal level, so no, if astronomers are looking out, the stars are not going to be 10 years out of sync.
Because it's not just, she didn't just pull a Superman and rewind. It was the entire universe.
It was the cosmos, basically. Yeah.
It was time itself.
Yes. So yeah, so how do I put it? So she rewound a single aspect of existence. Her power did not reach out across the universe and rewind every single thing in that sense. Her power didn't explode throughout the universe. It affected time itself from the point that she was at.
Okay.
And that effect spread. So that effect, so her touching on time and reversing time itself, that effect that was put on time, that's what spread throughout the universe, not her power itself.
The more I think about it, the more I'm confused. So I'm moving on.
It makes sense to me.
I'm glad it makes sense to you, buddy.
Let's see. All right. Anyway, back to Kurai. Starting to hallucinate now. Man, as if Deku's new weakness was enough to worry about, now this. Hope he can get himself some major help. How will everyone react to this knowledge? Will Kurai be able to tell them when he's hallucinating? That whole scene was just as scary, if not scarier, than the evil Blake in the mirror. Huh, I hadn't thought it, I can see the parallels, but, to me, the evil Blake in the mirror would have been scarier. But, okay, cool. Yeah, that's... Again, this is why I need your guys' input, because I can only see inside my own head. I need this kind of input to understand what everybody else is saying. But yeah, that's interesting. That's interesting. That was scarier than Blake in the mirror. Huh. All right. Let's see. All right. He goes on to say, "There, 2 reviews in 1. See you next chapter, Mataris. Thank you for doubling up on the reviews. I do appreciate that. Let's see. Do you want to take this last one, or should I do it?
I'm gonna let you take the last one.
Okay. All right. Last one is from Silikira. All right. More depressing chapters. Oh no, more depressing chapters. Boy, I hope that things actually start getting on the up and up for these guys soon, because they really could use it. Also, I was baited into thinking this would be a feel-good chapter, especially given that opening scene with my favorite sassy boy being a riot. Him comparing jail to Santa's workshop was so perfectly stupid I couldn't help but laugh at it. Their meeting with their mom was really heartwarming, though I now kind of wish we could have seen her reaction to hearing about Kurai's death before the resurrection. I suppose the only way that would happen at this point is a flashback, but you seem kind of reluctant to use those at this point in time. Yeah, I don't really have any plans to use any flashbacks anytime soon. I don't think. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I gave you guys 2 chapters loaded with them, and people didn't seem to respond to that so well. So, yeah, I'm not staying away from them on purpose. I just don't have a use for them anytime soon, I don't think. But yeah, maybe eventually I could do that. Let's see. The planting of the idea that something was wrong in his mind was absolutely sublime. As a reader, I immediately figured that something was about to go wrong when he saw that reflection that wasn't actually there. But you conveyed it in a manner that made sense to us, but not to the character itself. The pacing for the hints was also well done, sprinkled in every other scene that passed, so that it's not a constant presence that drew Kurai away from what was happening around him, but just enough to let him remain present with plausible alternate explanations for why he was exhibiting these symptoms, even as they appeared. Until, of course, the problem was made irrefutable. I'll get to that in a bit, though. Yeah, I have some experience with, like, let's see, what's that saying? It's like when you hear hoofbeats, look for horses, not zebras. And
I've never heard that.
You've never heard that?
I've never heard that.
Honestly, I don't remember where I heard that from, but like I relate to it because when I was when I was getting sick from the diabetes, there was a perfectly good plausible explanation for every symptom that I was experiencing that pointed to something else, and that's why we didn't catch the diabetes until it was just about too late.
Yeah.
So that's not something I put in of myself on purpose here, I don't think.
You just relate.
But yeah, I definitely relate to it.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's like anytime I have aches and pains, I'm very unaware of my body, so I like injure myself and don't notice frequently, and so every once in a while it's like I'll notice, I'll be having a conversation.
Didn't you like get stabbed with a stick and then like didn't notice until the next day when you were like bleeding all over your classroom?
I did, actually. So I was riding a horse and some wind picked up and blew this large gate closed as I was walking forward, so of course the horse spooked. My trainer is a wacko, so I was actually carrying a stick for an exercise while I was riding, so I dropped the stick and grabbed the reins, but by the time I did that it was too late, and the stick wedged between my leg and the gate as the horse was bolting forward. So of course the force of the stick is what pushed me off the horse, and it dug into my thigh, and I didn't know that it cut me.
How do you miss that?
Well, there was a lot of adrenaline. Like I hit the ground.
You didn't notice it until the next day, right?
Genuinely did not. So I was, I'm not aware of my body at all. So like, I hit the ground, and of course it hurt when I hit the ground, but I'm, adrenaline's going, so I'm up and chasing the horse. And so, by the time I've got the horse all settled and he's clean, I'm just like, well, my booty's sore, but I'm good. That was nice. And then, I changed, I showered. I genuinely did not notice the gash in my leg.
Was it like in a spot that was hard to see or something?
It was my inner thigh, and I don't look there.
Okay.
I don't look there.
For some reason, I thought it was on the outer.
No, because it got jammed between my leg and the saddle, and that's how it pushed me off.
Okay, that makes a little
that
makes a little more
and
sense.
So. But
even so,
I was
that's a hole in your leg.
I was going to, and it was about 6 inches long and an inch wide. So it was really like, it was bad. But again, I'm not aware of my body at all, and being raised very, very religious, like it's very close to areas that you don't think about nor look at ever. So I just, it did not occur to me that I was, I figured I was sore because I fell off the horse, but that was it. And then the next morning I'm sitting there in my little uniform outfit for school, and I noticed, I walked to school and I noticed my leg was throbbing. I'm like, I guess I'm a little more sore than I thought. And then, I'd be having conversations and I'd notice, like, man.
You must have scabbed, but then the scab would have broken while you were walking.
Well,
or something,
what
right?
happened was I was swelling as I was sitting in my school, and it broke open. And all of a sudden I felt the tear when it broke up. It opened from the swelling. And so I put my hand down to my inner thigh, and I feel that I am like bleeding and oozing. Then I didn't even know I had a cut, and it was big. It was really big, and it was really nasty.
Again, I don't understand. I understand. So I don't understand how you missed that.
There was a lot of trauma. I was more focused on my brain than what my body was feeling, and so I remember it was just the funniest thing, because I'm in the middle of class. I've been in class for 45 minutes. I raised my hand, and my teacher is like, what's going on? Because I was very shy. I didn't normally speak. And I was like, I didn't know what else to say. I was like, I fell off a horse. And he says, what?
Just in the middle of class.
Just in the middle of
that's
class.
That's what you led with.
That's what I led with, because I'm awkward. You know me. And no, first I raised my hand and I said, "Can I go to the nurse?" And he's like, "Yeah, why?" And I said, "I fell off a horse."
And now he's probably thinking he's got to send you to the nurse for a different reason.
All the kids, everyone in the room's looking at me like, what is wrong with her? And of course, later on that day, because we have our little uniform skirts, everyone like saw the level of like swelling and damage that was down there, and they were like, holy cow. But it was just, again, it's like sometimes if you're not focused on whatever is wrong, whether it be a mental health issue or a physical issue, you'll notice little signs that something's not right with your body. Like, I was a little bit dizzy and I kind of felt some throbbing in my leg, and I figured I was just sore. I was trying to pay attention in class, but all of a sudden I put my hand down and my thigh is wet because I was 8th grade.
8th grade, okay.
I was in 8th grade.
Okay.
So I would have been 13 years old.
Gotcha.
13 or 14.
That would have been like, what,
13.
2 or 3 years after we first met?
Before we met.
Before we met.
It would have been a couple years after. It would have been a year after we met.
A year after. So
for the first time.
You were at the Air and Space Museum in your 7th grade trip?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Cool.
Yes.
Cool.
Anyway, so
Sorry.
That's a super random tangent, but
Point
it goes
is,
to say,
yeah, like it's the human body is so weird. It's like there really is any number of explanations for things that can be
and I mean,
explained
there's
away.
also referred pain. So sometimes you'll have if you have a severe wound, whether it, your brain doesn't have the energy to focus on that level of pain. So you'll feel it spread out or somewhere else. Like I had a surgery and I actually did not feel the pain where my incisions or the surgery was, but I felt it all over my chest because my brain
knew that there was damage, but it needed to send the signal somewhere else.
Yeah, because it was such a high level of pain that it referred it in different places. And I've talked to a couple of psychologists who've said the same thing. Emotionally, your brain will do the same thing, where if there's something wrong psychologically, your brain just can't handle that level of pain. It'll create a different problem, or it'll just switch that part of your brain off so you're not thinking about it.
Interesting.
And that's why trauma victims often have repressed memories, and that's a real thing.
Their brain dissociates.
Yes, because
they seal off that. Yeah, so like,
and it's
I know that from firsthand experience. Like when I'm not medicated, I have a propensity for blackout episodes. I'm not unconscious, but I don't remember what I'm doing. Like, it's not like I'm sleepwalking either. I just don't remember what I'm doing later.
Yeah, well, what'll happen is you'll get emotionally escalated.
And I devolve into a line of circular reasoning, right?
And then your brain is, it can't handle that level of turmoil. So all of the energy just goes into a backlog basically, and so then you do whatever for as long as the episode lasts, you don't remember what happened, and someone has to explain to you what happened for the last hours or whatever, however long it was. And that's just it's neat because our bodies are extremely energy efficient, and that's why these things happen.
Yeah. It's interesting, and these kinds of issues don't just manifest themselves psychologically in an invisible network that we can't see or touch. Every time I have one of these episodes, my scars form in my brain. Which is why
scar tissue.
It does create scar tissue, which is another reason why I have some memory retention issues. So I can be thinking about any number of things at any given time, like 5 or 6 things at a time, but I can only maintain a memory of a lot of these thoughts for so long because I have a hard time putting stuff into long-term memory storage, basically.
Yeah.
So, yeah, this is there really is any number of
I just, that being said, I think I also appreciate how it was gradual that he started noticing these symptoms.
Yeah.
Because that little reflection in the door and then in the window, and then his friends are like, oh, there's something out there, and
no, he's like, there's something out there, and then they go out, some of them go outside, and they're like, there's literally nothing that could be out there, and so he's just, and I liked being able to use things that would seem insignificant about his time in the afterlife that could relate to it, because he talks about, because Yairo's is like, she's like, are you not sleeping well? He's like, well, I'm just getting used to the fact that I actually have to sleep again, because in the afterlife, he didn't need that.
And so
to
he's
him,
kind
it makes
of,
sense.
he's explaining away why he's feeling the way he's feeling, because that's the only thing that makes sense to him right now.
Yeah.
Just like, I think you said when you moved to Australia and you were having all of the health issues, everyone said, oh, he's just being a grouchy preteen who's mad at his parents for
I was like, one of the first symptoms was I was
away.
really thirsty. We moved from a really wet climate to a really dry climate, so everybody was feeling more thirsty. I was really moody all the time. I was 12. I was going into 13. We all know what happens during that time, especially with boys. Boys get angsty. And then... I wasn't feeling as hungry. My metabolism's changing. Again, I'm turning into a teenager. So on and so forth. There were alternate explanations. But eventually it did get to a point where it's like, oh no, he's actually sick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so I think, he's doing that. Because, I mean, when you're in a somewhat healthy frame of mind, I would hope you would say, okay, well, I'm not going to catastrophize every little thing that I feel,
Yeah.
And so you just, it's easy to say, oh yeah, I'm probably just needing sleep or water or whatever and I'll be good. But not always the case.
Mm-hmm. All right. Back to the review, though. Sorry for the...
Super long tangent.
That was a super long sidebar.
Sorry. We haven't seen each other in a few hours. I literally got home when we sat down to record. So I think we're just enjoying talking to each other at this point.
That probably is part of it, yeah.
All right, sorry.
I mean, talking to you is always a good time.
Yay. Okay, finish the review.
Sorry, finish the review.
We are so distracted.
All right, let's see. First, I wanted to sidebar and say that Kurai and Little Aries' reunion was so cute, and the bit where she met her older self was really well handled. Aizawa being afraid of Miss Joke being around was a great little snippet to throw in so that the next scene could break and transition into the next one. That's something I need to work on more often, I think. Like... Not necessarily in a comedic timing, but like a lot of times what I'll do is like the scene's over and then I'll put in the the space and then I'll move on to the next scene.
Yeah.
Like it's not to say that I should throw something like this in every single time, like even for comedic purposes, but I do feel like my transitions could use some work in some instances.
See, and my transitions are horrid, which is why I'm not the writer. So I'm glad you can identify that and how you want to work on it, because that is beyond me.
Let's see. The gift scene was a great mix of tense and uplifting, seeing as there's still some sore feelings between Deku and Kurai, but for the most part, it made me smile. The All Might figurine with support gear was a great idea, and Kurai getting Mina a new dress to replace the one that she had, kind of right before their bad luck streak started, was something that warmed my heart, seeing them being so caring to one another, even in spite of things being what they are now. The mental breaking honestly took me by surprise. Not in the sense that it happened, but that it happened so swiftly. I really thought that you were going to stretch out this new descent into insanity over the course of a few more chapters, as opposed to a singular entry's coverage. It didn't feel rushed, though that might be due to the fact that a proper psychological breakdown has been a long time coming for Kurai, which I would also attribute to the pacing of the hints that I mentioned earlier. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was one thing that I think I mentioned in the last podcast that I liked the way you paced that.
Okay. Yeah, I felt good about.
And it needs to happen. And I mean, people have been saying for the last year, it's like, okay,
I want to say like the last 2 years or so.
When's he gonna snap? And
he's snapping. Here's your answer. He's snapping. Yeah. I'm glad that this direction is being well received. This was to me, this was the big risk. Was like how the aftermath of his coming, like the coming back to me. Like I knew that was going to be a risk, but I was confident that I could handle that part.
Really?
Yeah. What I wasn't as confident about was taking the fallout in this direction specifically.
Okay.
But I'm glad that it's turning out well so far. Let's see. This story has taken a shift not only in tone but almost in genre, as I'm getting some vibes from this that feels like it's almost about to turn into some kind of psychological thriller. This should be interesting. Yeah,
slightly.
I guess.
Not.
I'm not a horror person.
Yeah, you're not.
I can't watch horror, so I. In no
that's the
stretch
thing.
of my imagination do I see myself being
horror
able to write horror
and psychological thriller are very different.
See, to me, they're in the same category because, like, they
get
the
bother
same
you on the same level.
They bother me on the same level, yeah.
See, and, like, for me, like, horror is, like, gore, creepy, like, spiritual stuff, and then psychological thriller is more, like, disturbing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in the past, you've definitely touched on that. You're not, and I
think
we
I'm
all
leaning
know.
harder into it this time.
Yeah, but we all know that you're good at bringing things around so that we can kind of have a more, not necessarily happy ending, but, you know, you're good at bringing it around so that there's closure even when you delve into this. So we'll see where it goes from there.
Yeah. Let's see. I saw that you'll be drawing from your own experiences for what's coming next, so I think I will wish you luck on doing so. I would urge that you don't overextend your willingness to confront these demons of yours to the point of your own detriment, but you seem to know yourself well enough that you feel confident in taking this on. So good luck to you, sir, and I will eagerly await the next installment. Until the next one, happy writing to you.
Nice. Yeah, thank you for the concern. I think a lot of, like, the real heavy parts were written in the past. But that being said, like, just so you guys know, we're good. There is ongoing therapy to also just kind of support.
Yeah.
To support.
I didn't start going to therapy because I was like, oh, I'm going to write this story and I'm going to face my demons through it. I should probably get some therapy from it.
It's just because yeah, and it's just because everybody needs it. Like, every few years we'll go and have some housekeeping done because I think everyone should, because we live in a really painful world, and no matter what kind of life you have, like, you're gonna have to deal with some crappy stuff, and so it's good to have therapy in general. So, but if you are concerned about delving into dark things, don't worry. I mean, I think most of the heavy stuff was already kind of hashed out, and this is more kind of going back and reflecting on it. So, but thank you for the concern, and thank you for the well wishes.
Yes, and thank you everybody for your reviews. With all that being said, I think we're going to go ahead and let the chapter play out. So we'll see you guys in just a few minutes for the retrospect, and this one's going to be interesting, I think.
Start to fall as it turns to a pour. We're here again in this storm, but we've been here before. I see the street signs warning, telling me that I have no other place I could go. Feel like I'm stuck in motion, can't find balance, I'm living in a vertigo. Everything is nothing like before. I've tried to hold it together,
I've worked a lot of cases in my time, and I thought that I'd seen everything, but somehow you guys have actually managed to bring me a patient that I am absolutely baffled by, said Dr. Kentaro. He was a psychologist who specialized in handling cases that involved heroes dealing with post-traumatic stress disorders, and an old friend of Principal Nezu. The small creature and Aizawa had come along with Kurai to a diagnostic appointment, which they hoped would reveal the source of the issue that seemed to be causing the boy to hallucinate. Has his brain been damaged by his death and subsequent resurrection, then? Nezu asked worriedly, while Aizawa remained as stone-faced as ever. Frankly speaking, when you told me about the sequence of events leading to his being brought here, I was expecting there to be some kind of neurological or chemical deterioration, Kentaro said with a shake of his head. The thing is, the CT scan didn't show us anything, and following that, even the MRI showed completely normal brain functions. So, there's nothing wrong with him? Nezu asked, looking baffled. There shouldn't be anything wrong with him, Kentaro said carefully. I was almost starting to wonder if he hadn't faked the whole thing, but something caught my eye when we ran his blood work. That being, Aizawa asked a little impatiently. His adrenaline and cortisol levels were pretty high for someone faking a hallucination, the doctor told him. There was also the fact that he had the shakes for a while, and the CT scan showed that he wasn't doing it on purpose. He's genuinely terrified of something. So what do we do now? Nezu inquired. My recommendation is that he be placed in an environment where we can keep a constant monitoring of his psychological state, Kentaro answered after a moment of thought. I can't help him if I can't find the source of the disturbance in his psyche, and that's obviously going to take more time than what a simple introductory visit allows for. There's a hospital that I can recommend which has an excellent recovery rate for the mentally disturbed, while I'll be able to have a team observe him. We'll also be able to offer consistent counseling for him. Do you think it will do him any good if you don't know what's wrong with his mind? Aizawa questioned. I don't know, Kentaro admitted. As I said, I've never seen a case like this before. He has all the physical symptoms of someone who's been frightened by a hallucination, except for his neural pathways. That being said, I highly doubt he'll get better on his own. He paused before he added, if you'd like to get a second opinion, I understand. Maybe another doctor will see something that I've missed, and he'll be on his way to a treatment process that sees him to his old self. I doubt that, Aizawa muttered into his scarf. He's been through too much to ever return to his old self. Something on your mind, Eraserhead? Kentaro asked, looking curious. Just that you should keep in mind going forward that Hikari has probably been through more than all the pros you've treated up to now. The other man shrugged. There's also the fact that he doesn't want to recover so that he can be a hero again. He wants to come away from our world entirely. Kentaro's eyebrows rose in surprise, but all he said in response was, Do I have your permission to move forward with my treatment plan, then? He'll have to move out of the dorms if we do this. He knew that UA had tightened up its security astronomically over the last year due to villain activities, and he didn't see these two just giving up their charge without some kind of conditions in mind. As long as we put him into your care under a different name, and we can send a hero we trust to work undercover as one of the staff while he stays there, he should be safe, Nezu answered. He hardly looks like he did when we left for Nadu Island, having vanquished the Nomu in Fukuoka. We haven't allowed the media on our campus since his revival, so no one has an image of what he looks like now. The doctor had to concede that the principal had a good point. In fact, when Kurai had been brought to his office, he hardly recognized the boy as the same one who had surpassed Endeavor and Hawks in Fukuoka back in late autumn. With silver white hair, no robotic limb, and a slumped posture, the chances that anyone would recognize him in public was pretty slim, especially if he went by a different name. And on the off chance that he was recognized by someone with villainous intents, he would have a hero to watch him most of the time. Not to mention that there was the thought that it would be incredibly foolhardy to frighten someone as unstable and powerful as Kurai. All that in mind, he nodded and said, Alright, that sounds reasonable to me. I'll need Eraserhead's signature on a few forms before we can get the transfer started. In the meantime, it would be best if you prepare him for the upcoming arrangements. Understood, Nezu said as he slid off his chair and bowed to the doctor. Thank you for agreeing to help us, Kentaro. Don't mention it, he answered with a smile. Just doing my job. He seemed as though he was about to add more, but then his pager beeped, leading him to take it off his belt, and frown when he stared at the little screen. What is it? Aizawa asked, though he already had a pretty good idea of what it was about. It's Hikari, Kentaro answered. Seems he's having another hallucination, and he's asked to be sedated. I'd better get down there, you two should come along. The trio walked in on the fairly distressing sight of Kurai shouting while yanking on his hair as he stumbled around the room in a manner similar to a drunkard. Two nurses were also in the room, both looking unsure how to proceed, given the dangerous nature of the boy's quirk. While they weren't aware of the fact that his quirk had been taken and replaced with something else, they were still right to fear being caught up in the crossfire between him and his tormented mind. We're done when I say we are! He snarled before he slammed his head into the wall loud enough for one of the nurses to let out a frightened yelp. And I say we've been done since... He was suddenly bound by a strong cloth that utterly restricted his movement, which had come from Aizawa's neck after he shouldered his way past the frightened nurse in order to take control of the situation. You need to calm down, the Erasure hero said flatly as Kurai's panicked eyes locked into his bloodshot ones. The boy was bleeding from his scalp, and already there was swelling at the point of impact. There's nothing in here that's going to hurt you. Do you know that? Kurai asked heavily as he breathed hard, his eyes glazing over as his vision swam in and out of focus. Is that what you know? Catch him, Aizawa ordered to the nurse that hadn't been pushed aside, even as Kurai's knees began to buckle. The man barely understood in time to catch Kurai's collapsing body so that he didn't strike his head on the floor again. Once his student was lying down in the recovery position, Aizawa released his hold on the scarf and allowed it to settle back on his shoulders so that the other nurse could help him get onto the bed. Giving the doctor a baleful look, he said, You've certainly got your work cut out for you. I can try to put him back on the right path. Kentaro answered in an equally grave tone. The real struggle will be when he's released from my care and back into yours. Even if he doesn't become a hero, he's in for a rough life if this is going to be part of it. A psychiatric hospital. Kurai mumbled thickly as he stared down at the papers in front of him, where the words refused to sit still on the page. making it so that he couldn't understand what they were trying to tell him. For how long? In spite of his concussive bout, he seemed lucid enough to hold a conversation without risk of breaking down again, at least for the time being. He was sitting in a room at the general hospital, having been admitted for a self-inflicted head injury. Aizawa was in the room with him, having been waiting for him to awaken so they could discuss his future. Unclear at this point in time, the older man informed him. They don't know what's wrong with you, and they can't treat you until they do. So I might end up in a psych ward for the rest of my life. Kurai chuckled dryly. Well, that isn't just the textbook definition of awesome. We're putting you in their care under an assumed identity. There will be a hero of our choosing who will be in the hospital to keep an eye on you, just in case the League somehow gets wind of the fact that you're not on campus anymore. They'll be low profile, someone the League will recognize. And how will I know them? Kurai asked as he leaned back against the pillows, closing his eyes as he did. I'll inform you of their identity before you're admitted. Which will be when, exactly? Sometime tomorrow or the day after. Kurai mused. One of his eyes snapped open to look at his teacher before he asked, I'm not going to have any visitors while I'm here, am I? It's up to Dr. Kentaro. Aizawa answered. Why? I know everyone's going to be pulling their hair out, trying to figure out if I'm okay or not. The boy muttered quietly as his gaze flicked down toward his right arm. If I'm going to be absent from their lives for any chunk of time, I'd rather have a chance to tell them why myself. The last time I disappeared into a hospital without a word, no one thanked me for it. I prefer to avoid making that mistake again. Is there anyone in particular who you want to see while you're here? His teacher eventually asked. Both of Kurai's eyebrows went up as he turned his head to look at Aizawa before he said, You're being awfully accommodating. I brought this on. Don't get used to it, Aizawa deadpanned. Answered the question before I changed my mind. Mina Izuku Ochako, Kurai answered, deciding that it wouldn't do to poke at his teacher's buttons any further. Future Aerie, too. What the hell made me think that poking these buttons was a good idea in the first place? He wondered absently. Yet my mind is further going than I thought, that knock to my head did more damage than my metal hand ever did. I'll speak to the doctor while I'm finalizing your paperwork, Aizawa told him as he slowly got to his feet. In the meantime, here. He tossed a small item that landed on Kurai's chest with a slightly surprising amount of weight as he moved to exit the room. My phone? You might not be allowed to have one at the hospital you're going to, the haggard man explained before he stepped outside. Make good use of that while you can. Thank you, sir. Kurai wasn't sure if Aizawa heard him or not, but for now he planned to take the man's advice. Aizawa was on his way to deliver the requested forms to Dr. Kentaro when he encountered a somewhat unexpected figure in the hallway. Here to admire the results of your handiwork? He asked as he walked past All Might without pausing. It was late at night, so the only people around with the skeleton crew needed to run the graveyard shift. Even so, he made sure to keep his voice down as to avoid being overheard by any curious eavesdroppers. How is he? He's being transferred to another hospital where they can keep monitoring him. The black-haired man answered as the retired hero fell into a stride behind him. There's no telling how long it will be before they're able to diagnose the problem, much less treat him. So, in other words, there's no telling when he'll be able to return to school, All Might sighed. He then almost ran into Aizawa, who had come to a full stop in the hallway. Eraser? As usual, you're still fixated on that one impossible goal that only you used to be able to reach. Never mind what everyone else around you may or may not be capable of. Aizawa answered, his voice sharper than a razor. Has it occurred to you that Hikari might never be able to attend school like a regular kid again? That he might not even be able to live a normal life at all? Isn't that kind of... You put ideas in his head, All Might. Aizawa snapped as he turned around on his heel, startling his colleague. You made him believe that if he didn't rise to the challenge, there would be no one left to take up the fight each time. Jamming a finger into the blond man's bony shoulder, he went on to add, You told him and Midoriya that because of the powers they had been given, the world was on their shoulders. You got them so wrapped up in the idea that because they were your chosen disciples, there could be no one else who would be able to stand against All for One in Shigaraki when the time came. We tell our students to go beyond the limits of their flesh, but do you know what happens when we push them beyond the limits of their minds? Eraser, I didn't... They end up in places like this, All Might. Eraser had said bitingly, cutting the other man off again. They come here because they're broken, and there's every chance that they won't recover. Most of the time, heroes come in because an enemy hurt them. Make no mistake, though. Hikari is here because of your failure to take into account the fact that he's still a child. All Might stood silently before his coworker for a few seconds, his face red with anger and embarrassment. However, once he was sure that Aizawa wasn't about to interrupt him again, he asked,
Wasn't it always you who spoke up to allow him to remain at UA? The fault for his condition doesn't lie solely on my shoulders. If I had known what you were filling his head with ever since Island, I would have transferred him out of the hero course then and there, as I was spat. He may be a hero, but he's not a messiah. By his own admission, he was never eager to take your place. You practically guilt-tripped him into it, and this is the result. I did the best that I could with the hand I was dealt, Aizawa. I couldn't be expected to... As a teacher, you're expected to keep the well-being of your students in the forefront of your mind at all times, the dark-haired hero interrupted curtly. From the beginning of your teaching career at UA, you have continuously shown that you are incapable of adhering to that basic principle of education. Turning back around, he said over his shoulder, I'd get myself ready for a hearing with the school's legal team if I were you. All Might's eyes widened before he sputtered, You filed an injunction against me? Dress your best. So, do you have any idea when you'll be allowed to leave? Ochako asked, sounding worried over the phone. When I'm better, Kurai answered with a shrug. He had his close friends, Mina, Izuku, Ochako, Todoroki, Tenya, Kirishima, Blake, and Yayorozu on speaker in one of the rooms. He wasn't sure which, since there was no video feed. Future Aerie was also present, but she had yet to say a word since the conversation had begun. But that could be years from now, he just said, his voice strained. Or it could be as little as a few weeks, Kurai countered before the other boy could go on. The biggest issue right now is that they don't know what's causing the hallucinations. Once they determine that, I'm sure it won't be long before I'll put in a medication to help me keep track of what's what. But what if they never find the source of the problem? Todoroki asked, which was followed by a babble of disapproving sounds and comments from the others. Lay off him, guys, Kurai said tiredly. It's a reasonable enough question. While I don't have a solid answer on that, my guess is that if they go too long without finding the issue, they'll try to find a medicine that will at least help the symptoms, even if it doesn't treat the actual issue itself. Can they do that with medicine? Kirishima asked. You ever heard of diabetes mellitus? Kurai tossed back. That's a type of diabetes, right? It's the kind where the body can't produce insulin, the hormone that turns food into energy, because part of the pancreas is dead, he explained quickly. There's no cure short of giving the patient a new pancreas, which, as you can imagine, doesn't happen very often. So, to keep the patient alive, doctors figure out what type of synthesized insulin is most compatible with their body and teach them to inject it into their body as needed. This lets them live for decades, comparable to what they would have lived if their pancreas worked like normal. Even so, it's not a cure. It's just a treatment for the symptom caused by the pancreas failing to do its job correctly. There was silence on the other end for a few seconds before Ochako asked, Since when do you know as much about the endocrine system as Deku does about hero statistics? Uncle Shiro was diabetic, Kurai answered. It's been a pastime of Akaru's to keep up with the latest research concerning the condition, so I'll get an earful of info every now and again. Happens often enough that I remember a thing or two. I mean, I'm pretty sure he was yammering about it when we were at my old house before Nabu, right? I tune out about 85% of what that guy says, his girlfriend replied, sounding a bit impatient. What does all that have to do with you? If they can't find the issue itself, they'll have to do some experiments to see which medications best help to manage the symptoms of the psychosis I've been manifesting, he summarized. Before any of you freak out at the word experiment, allow me to point out that many psych patients don't find the right combination of medications on the first go, even if they have a clear diagnosis. Everyone's bodies react differently to different medications. Do you have any idea of how you're going to continue your education while you're hospitalized? Yayorozu asked now. Is that even an option in your current state? No idea, Kurai admitted. I imagine that it'll come up at some point, but for now I think they just want to be sure that I'm not about to run on a rampage at any given moment. Why would you do that? Izuku asked him. When I went to your room, you were disoriented, not violent. It's easy for someone who panics to act in violence by mistake, the hospitalized boy answered. In my case, however, I tried to headbutt my hallucination and wound up knocking myself out when I put a dent in the wall. You what? What were you hallucinating? Blake's voice interrupted before Ochako could finish her utterance of surprise. What did you see? Kurai found himself being quiet for a moment before he answered. I don't feel like discussing that. If you can't tell your closest friends what's troubling you, how do you expect yourself to be able to be honest and open with a shrink you've never met before? The shadowy girl countered before anyone else could speak. What did you see? I'm not discussing this, Kurai repeated in a tight voice. Leave him alone, Shroud. Aerie's voice finally came over the line, somewhat surprising Kurai. He had honestly almost forgotten that she was in on the conversation since she hadn't said anything up to now. Is there anything you need us to bring you, provided we're able to come visit? The boy took a moment to remember that when he had first visited her in the hospital, he'd asked her almost the exact same question. I'll let you know once I've had my restrictions explained more clearly, he replied, glad that the topic of discussion shifted. Hopefully I'll be allowed to have some books to kill my boredom once I get in, but I can't think of anything else at the moment. Which hospital are you going to? Itamori, Kurai answered Todoroki, his eyes narrowing when he heard the other boy draw in a sharp breath. What's wrong with that? Nothing, he replied. That's just the same hospital that my mother has been in all this time. Kurai decided to thank his friend silently for not saying specifically that it had been more than a decade since she had been put there to be observed by some of the best doctors in the country. With my luck, maybe I'll make it out in time to apply for social services, he thought morosely. One thing had remained painfully apparent to him throughout this newest tribulation. There was no doubt in his mind that his third life in the same body was going to be the worst one of them all. Once everybody else had bid the boy good night, Kurai and Mina were left alone on the phone line. I guess I'll see you tomorrow, provided Mr. Aizawa was able to get you guys in, he said tiredly. Wait, before you go, Mina said, sounding uncertain of herself. Can I... When her voice trailed off, Kurai prompted her by saying, What's up? Sorry, but you got really defensive when Belladonna asked earlier, so I didn't know if you'd be willing to tell me what you saw. Mina's voice dwindled down to a near whisper by the end of the sentence, as if she were expecting at any moment for Kurai to shut her down with vehemence. Was it Moonfish? No, not him, he said quickly. I'll tell you, and only you. Please, don't tell the others what I saw. I won't, she promised. I told you, even if things aren't quite the same as before, I'll always be in your corner when you need me. Thank you, he said gratefully. Okay then, here it is. I keep seeing myself as Kai. He waited to see if Mina had anything immediate to say, and when she didn't, he added, He keeps telling me that I'm not done. At first I was seeing him in the corner of my eye, or hearing his voice at the edge of my range, but the other night he appeared in my mirror as my reflection. Only he didn't stay in the mirror. He came out, like he was standing in the room with me, and that's when I really knew that I wasn't just overtired like people have been guessing. I'm sorry that happened to you, she said with a warm sympathy that made him miss her enough to bring a lump to his throat. Can you think of any reason why your hallucination would appear like that? I don't know. He shrugged before letting out a dry laugh. Maybe it's divine punishment from my ancestors for choosing to turn my back on all the people I could save with one for all. Can they do that? Mina asked, sounding startled. I can't really remember, but I don't know that I would put it past them, he answered with another shrug. When a kid's throwing a tantrum because he didn't get what he wanted, you spank him, right? My parents never spanked me, Mina reminded him. You get the idea, he countered. Either way, feels like I'm damned to misery. What do you mean by that? His girlfriend asked, her worry increasing. Well, if this is some kind of punishment from a higher power or some other entity from the nether, then I see myself having two options, he grumbled. One, I give in to everyone's expectations and return to being the hero, where I will almost certainly face some kind of heroic and or horrific death yet again. Two, I keep my resolve to stay out of a life of heroism, and am haunted by my own mind for the rest of my godforsaken life. Since I'm too stubborn to ever go with the first option, I suppose I'd best get used to the idea that my own brain is the enemy from now on. Is there no option where you get to live happily ever after? Mina asked, sounding like she was trying not to cry. I know it's hard to see right now, Kurai, but there's still good in this life. I'm here for you, and so are all of our friends. You know that, right? I do, he said heavily. And while I know I'll always have you with me, I don't know that the same can be said for all of our friends. How can you... I've seen it happen, Mina, Kurai interrupted her. My dad told me about the friends that he had when he was my age, and about the unbreakable bonds they formed in the years of their youth. Once they finished school, it wasn't a year before he lost consistent contact with all of them, because they each went separate ways in their lives. Some went into business, others moved abroad, few became heroes, etc. The only friends that my father remained close with until he died were the people he shared his everyday life with, his colleagues on the force. Before Mina could protest, he overrode her again and said, It's not that he didn't care about his old friends or that he grew to dislike them. Every once in a while they'd see one another, have a beer, catch up, promise to do it sooner next time, and then go years without exchanging so much as a Christmas card, only to do it all over again. They were still friends, but they weren't close like they had promised they would be. Unfortunately, I can only see the same thing happening between me and everyone else in the times to come. Kurai, I know you don't want to hear this right now, but the truth is that you're just finding reasons to make yourself more miserable. Mina's voice had taken on a new steel, and the force behind it surprised Kurai. Even if you're not going to be a hero, I am. And since you're going to be with me, that means you're sharing my friends with me and... Knucklehead. You got that? Yes, ma'am. In spite of himself, he couldn't help a little smile from creasing his face. Leave it to Mina to cut to the quick and address the glaring issue that no one else wanted to acknowledge, he thought. Thank you for being so stubborn. I learned from the best, she replied, sounding tired. Listen, we're supposed to be up in like 3 hours, so I'm going to get some sleep if you're okay to do the same. Yeah, sure, he said quickly. Sorry I kept you up so late. Again. Yeah, I'm sure I'll get you back for it one of these days, she answered with what sounded like a smirk. Love you, Guy. Love you too, Mina. See you soon. With those last words, the line disconnected, and Kurai was left alone with his thoughts. The moment that he registered that fact, his eyes narrowed before a familiar set of words rang in his ears. We're not done, Kai said, appearing to lean against the far wall at the edge of Kurai's peripheral vision. Don't interact with it, Kurai told himself, shutting his eyes tightly. Don't encourage the delusions, damn it. We're not going anywhere, the shade said in the same tone, and in spite of himself, Kurai's eyes flew open as he turned to look more clearly at the apparition. It was the first time that it had said something outside the lines of the promise that it wasn't done with him. We have work to do. Oh, great. His vocabulary is expanding. He thought as he resolved to shut his eyes again and try to go to sleep. Hopefully his delusion would leave him to his rest, but he wouldn't have been too surprised if he saw it in his sleep, too. There's a comforting thought. If you loved her as much as she loves you, you'd never allow yourself to become such a disappointment, the shade snorted. Kurai's eyes snapped back over to the ghost, who was wearing a smug grin. Figures you'd know which buttons to push, he growled as he clenched his fists, all thoughts of ignoring the phantom having been banished from his mind. Because we're not done, Kai replied, maintaining his superior-looking smirk. You keep saying that like it's going to change my mind, Kurai snapped as he sat up straighter in bed. If anything, you're getting me to dig in my heels harder. So you'll be content, existing as a perpetual disappointment in the eyes of the girl you claim to love, Kai countered. She's too kind to say it, but you and I both know that you have become what you have become in her eyes. Shut up, Kurai snarled. You're not real. You're just a manifestation of my insecurities and fears. You have no impact on reality. We have every impact on your reality, his ghost quipped. And your resolve has no comparison to our own, which can withstand the passing of the generations. What is that, a threat? Kurai snorted contemptuously. You'll haunt my descendants after you're done with me. If we are merely a figment of your tortured conscience, then you'd know that would be ridiculous, Kai smirked. This whole thing is ridiculous. And whose fault is that? Dah! You're meant to be a hero, Kurai, and even if we have to browbeat you into it, we will make sure you remember that fact before the end comes, Kai promised his living self. If you have the power to act, then it is your responsibility to use that power for the good of others, no matter the cost to yourself. And when I'm rid of this power, it'll be someone else's responsibility, Kurai shot back. You'll have no reason to torment me, because I won't be able to do anything to help anyone. What makes you think it'll be so easy to give up one for all? His ghost challenged him. You think it was easy for Izuku to pass on all of his hopes and dreams onto you, a dying man? We'll only warn you once not to make light of that sacrifice. He placed all those hopes in you, dead man, Kurai snorted. And what are you going to do, nag me to death? If that's the case, could you hurry it up so I could go back to... Kurai felt thunderous force smash him in the face, causing his blood to fly from his mouth as he was flung through the wall and into the lobby, where several members of staff let out frightened yells as he went sliding across the floor, dazed and confused. His body hurt all over, and he could just barely make out what was going on around him as his jumbled senses each tried to sort out what was happening to him. Was I sleeping? He thought once he started to gain control over his line of thinking. Was all of that a dream? As his eyes slowly came back into focus amid the sounds of an alarm echoing throughout the early morning hospital, he noticed faint traces of black electricity crawling along his arm, which ended in a fist decorated with spots of blood. Did I hit myself? He wondered stupidly as his jaw throbbed painfully, the lightning fizzling out as he continued to try and pull his mind together. Hey, are you okay? One of the orderlies asked as he came to kneel next to the semi-conscious boy. Can you hear me? Yeah, Kurai slurred, even as his left eye he felt his left eye being held open while a bright light shone into it. What happened? Who did this to you? I don't... He mumbled, cringing as his face announced its displeasure at being mistreated. As he tried to get the words out, he finally noticed the huge hole that remained in place of what had been the wall, which cut off his room from the rest of the hospital. How is he? Another nurse asked as he came to stand by his colleague. His eyes are equally reactive to light. His pulse is strong, but he seems disoriented, the first man answered. Looks like he took a bad one to the head. He might have a non-displaced fracture in his jaw. We'll take him to get an x-ray to verify, his coworker decided. Any idea what did this to him? He doesn't seem to know himself, the first nurse said with a shake of his head. I checked on him 20 minutes ago, and he was out like a light. I haven't seen anyone go in or out since his guardian left either. So I was dreaming, Kurai thought thickly. He started to say, then winced as his jaw flared with pain. Okay, kid, it's okay. Don't try to talk right now, the second nurse said kindly. We've got you. We'll put a security alert out for a villain with stealth capabilities. For all the good that'll do. In spite of his attempts to reassure the boy, he appeared troubled at the thought that someone would try to attack a sick person in their sleep. No, villain, Kurai managed to get out, forcing himself to speak past his swollen tongue and jaw. What's that? The first nurse said as he leaned closer to try and hear his charge a little more clearly. Kurai grimaced again before he shut his eyes and managed to spit out. I think I did this in my sleep. My quirk. No control. The two nurses exchanged looks of alarm before they surveyed the wreckage around them. Get that x-ray scheduled, the second nurse said after a moment. I'll get the on-call doc to authorize quirk suppressants. If there's a chance that he's really lost control of a power like that, we don't need another one of these happening. Got it, the first attendant nodded. I'll get him on a gurney in the meantime. As they hurried to do their jobs, Kurai could only wonder, am I losing my mind, or was it already lost and I just hadn't noticed? He would have smiled at the dark piece of humor, but his mouth was killing him, and he could now see Kai standing amid the rubble, glaring angrily at him. That was a warning shot, he told the wounded boy. We won't be so nice next time. Given the recent events at your school, how do you expect me to convince the parents that this is a wise career move for their children? Nezu measured his thoughts carefully while he looked at the small screen containing the worried image of an old comrade. Eventually he said, I don't have all the answers, Ozpin. All I know is that the situation is far graver than even we had come to expect. If we don't gather our forces and prepare them sooner than later, there won't even be a future for those children to defend. I don't know how, but you must convince more students and heroes to come to our aid. It won't be long before the League of Villains and their allies are ready to put Salem's machinations and ambitions to shame. At that, Ozpin's right eyebrow went up. You've never been one to exaggerate, Nezu, he murmured. Is the situation really so grim? Send Crow to investigate if you can't take my word for it, but if you do, please have him do so quickly, Nezu urged his friend. I don't have an exact timetable for the coming storm, given how certain events have already been altered, but the storm is coming. Please help us. Ozpin put his chin into his hand, his fingers covering his mouth as he fiddled with the cane that was resting against his armrest. Nezu waited for what felt like an eternity before he stirred and said, There are a few more first-year students whose parents I know will support us. I'll send Crow and Tai Yang along with them so they can join in time for your winter semester to begin. I'm sure it will do Ruby and Yang some good to see their father again. Thank you, Nezu said with evident relief. Once this crisis is over, I will do whatever I can to assist you in your own struggles. I would appreciate that, Ozpin replied with a wry smile. The White Fang has been quiet as of late, but Crow says that they still appear to be active, which is far more concerning to me, and why I can't afford to send more accomplished students your way. He almost ended the call there, but a thought seemed to occur to him, leading to him adding, When my students arrive, be sure to have the teacher keep an open mind when it comes to the team leader. He doesn't appear to be much at first glance, but he tends to surprise people. Don't worry, Nezu smiled a little ruefully. Eraserhead will not be their homeroom teacher. He has his hands plenty full as it is. Vlad King will be hard on them, but he won't put them under the threat of expulsion, especially given the current circumstances. Even with our experiences, I find this future Ares tale a little hard to accept, Ozpin admitted. Still, it's not as though we can afford to ignore it, and it certainly helps pieces of the puzzle fall into place that we could not make sense of beforehand. And before you ask, don't worry. I'll use the better part of discretion concerning the matters of All for One and his experiments. Once again, I thank you, Nezu nodded. I'll make the dorm and class arrangements on my end, as well as provide transport for those you're sending. I'll have Glinda send you the student profiles of Team Juniper tomorrow morning, then, Ozpin said with a note of finality in his voice. Take care of my students, Nezu. To the best of my ability, the little animal promised. Good luck, old friend.
In the shadows I've grown, in my struggles I've shown, I'll never back down for anyone. You think that this is the end, I've just begun. Through my life I've been gentle, but I know it's in my mental. Stop, need a moment, a component. I try to show it, so soft spoken. Am I broken? No. Who's my next opponent? Every moment pushes me to focus harder, show I can do anything I set my mind to. No obstacle I can't push through.
All right. So how we feeling?
This one was a challenge to get through, but not, and I don't say that in a way where it's like I felt dread going into it.
How do you mean?
Like, so I've only ever been on one side of these kinds of things. Like, I've been in Kurai's position, basically. Like, I've been on the receiving end of this is what's going to happen to you. This is what needs to be done. I've never been a part of the process where it's like, this is how we go about treating this, like, this during this time of crisis.
Okay.
I have, like, God willing, I'll never have to be on that side of an emergency situation as a parent. Like I said, God willing. But like writing Kurai's bits in this was actually a lot easier than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
It was being on the adult side of things that was more challenging to me.
Was it just because you...
And not even in an emotional aspect, honestly.
No.
Like I certainly put my emotions into it with the bits with Kurai and all that, and like how he's handling this new challenge. But like I almost worry that I wrote things a little too coldly from the adult's perspective. But I don't know. What did you think?
I mean, I felt that, Aizawa and Nezu had like a solid amount of concern, but I mean, when you're both an administrator and a guardian, there's a lot of variables you have to take into account. And so not only are they wanting to keep like citizens and their students safe.
He's a walking nuke.
He is. And, and of course they're concerned about him as a person because they're all he's got. And I mean, for me, I didn't think Aizawa was cold. I thought that I thought he was very in character.
He was pissed at All Might.
And with every right.
Yeah.
And he had a good point. I think the first time you read that to me, I was mortified. I was like, poor All Might. He didn't mean...
I do feel like, again, I do feel for All Might. Like, he really was put in a very difficult situation by all of this.
But I think...
But he does have to be held accountable for the actions that he's taken.
And, as someone who works with kids and who has kids, it is insane the level of emotional turmoil that can be caused in a child when you say the wrong thing. And just the amount of like just burden that they take upon themselves is incredible because they don't have those coping mechanisms yet. And Aizawa knows this. He's a seasoned teacher. He deeply cares for his students, even if he doesn't show it. And he's ticked because he's responsible for this kid and he's responsible for keeping the other kids safe. Yeah. And he's like, he's really calling All Might out. It's like, man, I get it. Your power is the antithesis to what we're facing, but that doesn't mean there's not other options.
Like I don't know how to say this without like sounding like it's tooting my own horn, so I'm just gonna shoot my shot and say I really like that line that I came up with where Aizawa was telling All Might he's like, he might be a hero, but he's not a messiah.
Well, he's a kid.
And
that was the whole point of the conversation. And I don't think that was cold at all. I think that was Aizawa caring about his kid and his students and saying, if this is how you teach, you're not good for these kids. This is just your own vanity project.
Yeah.
And so he's making a point to All Might that it's like, if you are in here working with these kids, it needs to be about the kids, not about you.
Not about the legacy, not about the world that you envision. This is about the world that the kids are needing to uphold at this point.
So it's interesting though, because the first time you read this to me, I was mortified, and this time I'm like, no, he's right.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's just because of the things I've been through in the education system in the last year or what, but I'm 100% with Aizawa, and I think that was just him being in protective dad mode.
Yep, Dad Zawa.
Yeah, and then that's what everyone knows, you know.
Let's see, so there was one. So I don't remember this, as I mentioned earlier during the reviews. I don't remember what happens when I go into blackout mode. But I had a psychotic break when I was 15, coming close to 16, and all I remember is getting really angry at my parents while we were on our way to church, and then I wake up like a day and a half later in a psych ward that's 10 miles from El Paso. And what had happened was I had my break. I tried to make a run for it. They dragged me to the hospital. I was refusing to cooperate, so eventually what they did was they told me either take this medicine in a sandwich or we put a needle in your butt. And I chose to take the medicine in a sandwich for dinner, which just knocked me on my ass for a good 20 hours or so. So I don't know if it knocked me unconscious or what. I just don't have any
memory of that.
I think I kind of remember the ambulance ride. But I'm not entirely sure.
But between being in a blackout episode and being drugged up, there's just not.
They didn't have room
lot.
for me in the city where we live in the psych ward, so
because
they're
just so inundated always.
They take me to an off. They had to take me to not an offsite, to
another
another
facility.
Location. Yeah, another facility, whatever you want to call it. And apparently one of the reasons they got on my case was because I was just like going nuts against the walls. Like I was smashing my head on stuff.
Yeah, you've done that in episodes.
Yeah, so they were afraid that I was going to like
injure yourself or someone else.
Actually, honestly, I don't think I could have injured anybody else, cuz like if I was in my right mind, that would be another matter, cuz like when I know what I'm doing, I know I can fight good. But at that point, it was just all animal instinct, for lack of a better term.
No, I know.
And they had all the nurses to be able to jump on me if they needed it.
And whenever I've seen you in an episode, you're not violent in any way. You just
self-destructive a little more, right?
Yeah, it's more like self-loathing and just circular reasoning and almost just like fear, honestly. Fear and anxiety. It's almost like in a very, very extreme anxiety attack. And so it's interesting because everybody's brain handles things differently, and you just that's where your brain's at. And I'm thankful that we have medication that can help you regulate, so that we don't have this happening to that extreme. But I'm glad that you can work this out. And I think maybe being a parent also can help you think, like, if my child were to have to go through this, what would it be like? Because, first of all, he's got physical injuries that have to be taken care of. So, of course, he's at a regular medical facility, but he's got to be relocated. But anyway, I mean, that kind of goes into the next part of the decision making, because we get to a point where he has to be on quirk suppressants.
Yeah.
And that comes a little later. But let's kind of move into, he and Aizawa talk. Aizawa's really gracious, I think, in saying, yeah, let me see if they'll let us bring your friends in so you can say hi.
Like you said earlier, it's like, these people are all he has.
Yeah.
Like, he needs a support group.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like his family can come see him.
Akaruru can come see him, but Akaruru's a little shithead.
Yeah, and his aunt and his aunt
and his
cousin, I should say.
But but part of the issue right now is that the world doesn't know that he's alive. Maybe I should have gone more into this, but Kentaro doesn't know about One for All and all that. They told him that Kurai was dead and somehow brought back to life. They didn't say how. And I would like to imagine that there are some doctors that Nezu would have worked with that would have followed, because it's Nezu is an animal who had a quirk and was experimented on by humans. I would like to think that Nezu had some friends that helped him escape from the experimentations. So like I kind of wanted to allude to maybe Kentaro was one of those people who helped him.
Oh, interesting. I wouldn't have thought of that. That's cool.
No?
I mean, I don't think a whole lot about Nezu.
Okay.
I mean, the first season, I totally.
I think he's got a really good. I think he has a potential for a very interesting like.
Oh, absolutely.
Like what the information they've given us is good. Like it's enough to let us know who he is and why he does what he does. But I think there's something to be explored there.
No, absolutely, and I'm sure they're gonna explore that in the manga at some point. I have no doubt.
Yeah, like for explanation's sake, Kentaro is a character that I made up. He's not a doctor from My Hero Academia universe. He is of my creation.
But in your head canon, he's somebody who may or may not
Nezu
have
would turn to if there's something
because he can trust him. Got it.
Yeah, because I think he would have had to have somebody helping him, I would imagine. And Kentaro can be one of those people where it's like, if they need something kind of kept on the DL,
they can go to him. Cool. Yeah, so I mean, then he's able to, again, graciously, Aizawa hands him his phone so he can, he can
contact his
friends, and of course that for me, and I feel like I'm almost more emotional than you on this one too, because just they have the conversation with the friends, and then once they walk out, and it's just him and Mina, like that hurts so bad. Just
you and I weren't able to talk at the time that I was hospitalized.
We were not able to talk at the time you were hospitalized, but what it brought me to was times when you would have episodes when you were first dealing with your diagnosis before you were regulated on medication, where you'd go into these modes and you would just start tearing yourself down, and you just be determined that your life was over and you're just not going to amount to anything, and it just killed me, and it hurt so bad. And so the conversation he had with her, and he was he wasn't being a total mopey, he was being realistic, and
drawing from experiences that he had seen and had himself.
Exactly. And he wasn't being optimistic. And that's what, as I've seen you in those modes in the past, I think I just really felt for Mina, because it's the most heart-wrenching thing when you're young and your life's just beginning, and the person that you love with all of your heart thinks that it's over.
It's interesting that you say that he's not an optimist, because back like in the first chapter,
he was very optimistic.
No. Back in the first chapter, he makes fun of himself for being a pessimist, and Mina was the one who was like, "You should try optimism every now and again." So like it was. I had a few different callbacks in this one in these last couple of chapters that I've enjoyed having. What did you think of the idea to put him in the same hospital as Todoroki's mom?
I thought it was like, I thought you were making a small world too small, but I know where you're going.
To me, to me, it makes sense from the medical field, because number two, Endeavor would be able to afford the best hospitals, right?
And of course, UA is going to send him to the best psychiatric
hospital. Nezu and
hospital.
Aizawa are going to send him to the best hospital.
No, it makes sense. It makes sense. At first, I was like, "What?" But
I actually don't know the name of the hospital that Todoroki's mom is in, so I just made up a name for it. So I just came up with a name for it. But yeah, I toyed with this idea for a while, and there's an interaction that's coming that for me justified it.
Cool.
So that's all I'll say on that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I did wrestle with this one for a while. Again, I had the question. I was like, am I making a big world too small?
But no, I think, in retrospect, I think it works. So then, I mean, the conversation ends. We have the conversation with All Might and Aizawa in the hallway, which we kind of covered already.
Yeah.
And then, of course, as soon as he's alone, we're dealing with the hallucination again, but it's much more real this time.
It's learning. He's just like, oh great, he's like, oh great, its vocabulary is expanding.
Yeah.
And not only that
made me chuckle.
And not only that, like it's poking him like where he knows, like where he really doesn't want to be poked right now.
Yep.
When I was first reading it, did you expect him to like smash himself through the wall a bit? Like,
I did not. That took me by surprise.
Okay.
I thought he might tear up his room a little bit, trying to fight it. But, you know, and then poor thing waking up, he's like, who did this to you? I think I punched myself.
Yeah.
You know?
In case it wasn't made clear in the chapter, so the conversation that he had with Mina and the others, that was real. He wasn't asleep for that. He basically just fell asleep as soon as that conversation was over, and he wasn't even aware of it because his hallucinations started coming after him.
So yeah, I mean, I think that's about it. So of course the
broke
final
his jaw. He's gotta get
and
quirk
now we're
suppressants.
gonna get some quirk suppressants to hopefully keep him and everyone else safe.
Yeah. So
while they figure this out.
Yeah. So the next few chapters are actually an original arc of mine, and it's been a while since I've done one of these. Like proper. Like I had the flashback chapter bits. I had the we've had the funeral bit going on, but all that fit pretty closely into what the anime was doing. Like it just kind of fit between the movie and the Christmas episode.
Yeah.
So this next bit is gonna go kind of in tandem with the Endeavor Agency arc.
Okay.
Like while everybody's training at the hero agencies and doing their internships, this next arc is going to be happening at the same time, but it's its own plot. And I'm actually going to be doing something that I'm really looking forward to. Like it doesn't start in the next chapter; it starts in the chapter after. There's a bit that's coming up that I'm really looking forward to. It's a bit of an experiment on my part, but I'm really looking forward to it, and I hope you guys enjoy it like as much as I've been working on it.
Nice. All right.
Like, was there anything that stood? Like, was there anything else in particular that stood out to you about this chapter?
No, I think I'm really curious to see what everybody thinks and about, because there's some details in the wording of the hallucination that I know point to specific plot devices that happen later, and I'm just curious to see who picks up on because there's very specific things that are said in the conversation that may give a hint to what's going on with him, and so I'm curious to see, because I have a feeling there's a couple real sharp cookies who might figuring out what's going on.
Some people might figure out what's about to come, but yeah, it's gonna either way. I'm having fun with this.
Yeah, absolutely.
A lot of the stuff that's been happening lately is it's been a little bit hard to get through in terms of writing the narrative.
But we're gonna get back.
We're getting back into something. We're getting back into something that I'm really, really enjoying.
Kind of get the plot moving here.
Yeah.
Now that we've dealt with all these heavy emotions and
time to start processing those emotions.
Yeah.
It's therapy time.
Let's go hit stuff.
Alrighty. Well, if there's nothing else you can think of,
that's about it.
Yeah. All right. Well, guys, thanks again so much for listening to us. I hope you are continuing to enjoy the story, and I hope you are looking forward to what's coming up next as much as I am. So until the next one, we're going to be going back to the regular schedule. So next chapter will be out in 2 weeks, and I hope you have a plus ultra time until then.
Bye.